All right, so here we go, bell ringer. And then we're going to talk about the French resistance and an attempt to take Hitler's life to assassinate him. Ho ho. All right, so describe the impact of the D-Day invasion. When did this event occur? Was the invasion a success? There you go. You guys get working on that.
It was 1944, right?
Yep, 1944. All right, so describe the impact of the D-Day invasion. When did it occur? When did it happen? What do you have? Go ahead, Jakar.
June 6th, 1944.
Yep, June 6th, 1944. Good job, good job. So, took a little bit of time, right? 1941, the United States gets involved with the war, but it took some time for the United States to get their feet wet, right? It was a little difficult because it was a new type of fighting, a new style of fighting. And with the U.S., our goal was to try to break this Atlantic wall that the German army had established since 1940 in northern France. Okay. All right. So, what set up this invasion? What was that conference called? Go ahead, Jakar. Yeah, the Tehran conference. Where did that happen? Tehran. What was the country? Cody, you know? You don't walk. You. Well, Iran. There you go. There you go. So Iran. Okay. So they did it in Iran just because it was a little bit closer to the Soviet Union, and because really no fighting was being performed there. All right. So with that being said, they wanted to have it as close as they could to the Soviet Union, so it didn't look like it was way far out of the way for Stalin to try to appease him a little bit, right? Okay. Because we all know Stalingrad is that turning point in Eastern Front in Europe. Okay. So they want to try to appease Stalin, and we know we got out of this is that Stalin wanted the Allied powers, Great Britain, America, to attack northern France, to establish and set up this invasion. And that's what Stalin got out of it. What did FDR want out of it? Jakari?
Oh, Japan.
Yeah, help with Japan after Germany was defeated. Okay, so that was kind of the I guess you say the agreement, the discussions, the terms that were being met and set at the Toronto Conference. Like I said, many people think that this was the start of the Cold War. Already, we see tensions arising with these democratic nations and communist Soviet Union. Okay, and how this war is going to really pit these countries against one another, as communism is going to spread to Eastern Europe. And FDR just agreed to it. It's like, yep, that sounds all right. Okay, we'll allow you to stretch to Eastern Europe because of your work and obviously the power that they established after this war in World War II. So the Toronto Conference set up this invasion really because the United States Allied powers finally had boots on the ground in Italy, right? They attacked that soft underbelly. And now it looks like the Soviet Union is really doing well in the Eastern Front, pushing back the German army. It's just a matter of time. Now you need to try to establish a three-front war. So D-Day happened June 6th, 1944. Who came up with the invasion? Who came up with the plan? Cody, go ahead. Nope. American general. Goes by the name. Yeah, there you go. Yep, Dwight Eisenhower, nickname Ike, right? He'll later be president of the United States. Okay, so we'll talk about him a little bit more after the war. But Dwight Eisenhower comes up with this invasion. He also came up with Operation Torch, the attack in North Africa. I don't know if I mentioned that before. But Eisenhower comes up with this invasion plan, and it's going to attack Germany and northern France across what body of water? Chris, go ahead. English Channel, good job. Was it established for June 6th, or did they have another date planned? Derby? June 5th. Yeah, what delayed it? Yeah, the weather. Okay, the weather. Good job. Because there was no clear, obviously, clear view. There was cloud cover. There was rain. It was really treacherous across the English Channel. So they're like, you know what? Let's postpone it a day. And I mentioned it yesterday. Could only imagine the stress and anxiety of these soldiers getting ready to invade northern France. It was probably almost sickening in a way. Okay, we all know how anxious we get before we maybe perform a task or we get ready for a game or a sporting event. This is war. Life's on the line. And these men are young, 18, 19 years old. So, real quick, 5 beaches. What were the 5 beaches? What were the 2 beaches that America invaded on? Haley, go ahead. Oh, you don't know? Yeah, good job. Utah and Omaha, right? Utah, Omaha, those are the famous beaches that America invaded in northern France. Okay, good. And what about the 3 other ones that Great Britain and Canadian forces invaded? Shikari, go ahead.
Sword, gold,
Yep.
and
Juno, who you're messing with, Holmes, right? Juno, yeah, good job. Good job. So Juno, sword and gold. Okay, so those are the 5 beaches that the Allied powers invaded on. Like I mentioned, and like you saw a little bit yesterday, I don't know if you got to see the whole video then or not, but very costly. Okay, there's a lot of casualties, a lot of deaths with this invasion. The German army even expressed how brave these soldiers really were as they were marching literally to their deaths. Okay, we all know the German army aimed their attention at these invasion pods. Once the door swung down, that's what they aimed at. And they're really sitting ducks. Okay, many of them didn't even make the beach because they drowned, because they're really caught in the water with all that heavy equipment. We all know how hard it is to run through water, right? It's really tough. It's like you're running in slow motion in a way. So those easy pickings really for the German army, for the American Allied power troops coming up the beaches. Another thing that helped is that we had parachuters, right? Airborne divisions being dropped behind enemy lines, trying to cut off supply lines, invade the bunkers, right, and outflank the German army there that was established at the beachhead. I don't know if I mentioned it yesterday. Who was the general of the German army that helped with the defenses at D-Day? Who was it? We talked about him before. He was in North Africa. He had a pretty neat name. Yeah, Erwin Rommel, Desert Fox, right? Okay, Desert Fox. He actually wasn't at the invasion. Okay, he actually went home. And at this time, he thought that the war was coming to a close, and he really didn't see the point of Germany continuing to fight. So we already see German head officials already disagreeing with Hitler at this moment. And that's going to lead us in what we're going to talk about today with Operation Valkyrie and this failed assassination attempt on Hitler. And obviously with the French resistance. They helped with the D-Day invasion by trying to disrupt communication, disrupt supply lines, and destroy any type of transportation systems. Okay, and push out the German army. Just really be a thorn in the side for the German army that was occupying France at that moment. All right, so was the invasion a success? Was it, Ethan? Yeah, right. We broke that Atlantic wall the Germans had established and set up. I mentioned it yesterday. Germany was really upset that who wasn't there to help them? What really helped Germany take over large portions of land at the start of the war? What was before that? Blitzkrieg attacks. So what comes in first? What's that? Yeah, the Luftwaffe, right? The Luftwaffe. He's like, oh, a lot of the German soldiers like, oh, Luftwaffe was really not even there to try to help us protect the beachhead, and that's kind of what the demise was for the German army. That's what they explain anyway. Whenever you hear a perspective of a German soldier, but yeah, it was a success for the Allied powers. We broke that Atlantic wall. We finally have boots on the ground here in northern France. And it's just a matter of time because Germany now has to fight in three-front war. Right? They had to fight in three fronts. Eastern front against the Soviet Union, down here against the United States and Great Britain and parts of Italy, and then now in northern France. America, Great Britain, Canadian forces pushing in northern France. And this is going to try to push the German army back to our own borders. So we should be finishing up the war. Okay. All right. Any questions on the D-Day invasion? I know there's a lot of information for it. And like I said, I can talk about it all I want, but I really do think the start of Saving Private Ryan, if you guys ever see it, just be, I want to warn you, it's a little gruesome at times to watch and brutal. That really explains the invasion in itself. Okay. I guess that Call of Duty World War II does a good job too, putting you in the soldier's perspective. Okay, I know I played that a couple times, and yeah. Okay, so terms for today. Like I mentioned, we watched that video on the liberation of France, French resistance fighters. Okay, we're going to mention them today, as France is going to be obviously liberated. And with Operation Valkyrie, this failed assassination attempt. There you go. So we have Liberation of France, Operation Valkyrie. All right. All right, so liberation of France. What do we have? What do we got here? Andrew, what do you have, buddy?
I had the liberation of France happened in the Second World War and was accomplished through diplomacy, politics, and the combined military efforts of the Allied powers, the Free French forces in London, in Africa, and the French resistance.
Okay, all right. Okay, so the French resistance groups, along with the Allied powers, mostly the Allied powers, but French resistance groups helped try to liberate Paris, liberate France. And this is happening in 1944, right after the D-Day invasion. Okay, once the Allied powers are now pushing the German army back to their own borders, and it's just a matter of time, right, until this war is ending. So liberation of Paris, liberation of France is really that next step to the ending of war in Europe. Okay, the ending of World War II. And all thanks to the Allied powers, Great Britain, America, Canadian forces. Okay, obviously a little bit more involved too with other countries, but and French resistance fighters. All right, Operation Valkyrie. What do we have for this? Kind of mentioned this already. Chris, what do you have?
The plan was known as Operation Valkyrie. It was the idea. Well, it was supposed to be an assassination. The idea was once Hitler was dead, they would just say that it was like they would claim that it was like an attempted assassination by the Nazi group.
Yeah.
So they could just take over Berlin after that.
Good. Good job. So Operation Valkyrie was actually a plan in case anything would ever happen to Hitler. Okay. So if Hitler would ever die, if there's ever an issue of many military officials or leaders in the German army, German military, right, if they died off, then the reserve army would take control, and they would actually look to surrender and give up, like pretty much surrender to the Allied powers. So this was a plan, I guess you could say, that was initiated to try to obviously allow the reserve army to take control if there was anything to ever happen to the German officials, if they were assassinated, if they were killed, if something would ever occur. And this would allow the German army to maybe continue to keep fighting, but we all know at this moment, this operation kind of was established that this was the end, right? And the German army would probably surrender to the Allied powers. So this was like a last case scenario operation, a last case scenario thing for the German army. Okay. And there is a German official, which we'll talk about today, who tried to kickstart this, right, before we even knew that Hitler was dead. Okay, so we'll talk about that today. All right, so we talked about the D-Day invasion. There we go, northern France. Allied powers are marching in and pushing back that German Atlantic wall. All right, so the liberation of Europe. Allies liberate Paris. Looking good now for the United States, Great Britain, Soviet Union. Okay, Stalin got what he wanted, that invasion in northern France, and this three-front war is ensuing. It's happening. It's just a matter of time until Germany's going to be obviously surrounded. French resistant groups, okay, they were constantly causing a thorn in the side for Germany throughout the whole time they were occupied by the German forces. So since 1940, whether it was cutting communication lines, really just trying to kill as many military officials as possible, just by drive-bys or just by maybe placing a bomb at a certain location where they could kill as many German officials as possible. Maybe it's just through literature, articles that were written, posters that were posted across cities to try to push many people to rebel against the German army. We all know Germany's fighting who in the Eastern Front? Soviet Union, right? Okay, so a lot of their forces, a lot of their supplies and armaments are probably focused on the Eastern Front, right? So this allowed resistant groups to be very successful in fighting back against the German occupation there in France. So for 4 years, yeah, Germany controlled it, but it wasn't any means, I guess to say, peaceful at all, right? There was a lot of different insurrections occurring, a lot of different rebellions, a lot of different types of, I guess to say, hostility and chaos, really, on the streets in France, as these rebellious groups were trying to push back and kick back against the German occupation there. But after the D-Day invasion, like I mentioned, these resistant groups were trying to disrupt these supply lines to the bunkers, to the Atlantic Wall that Germany had established in northern France. Their goal is to try to destroy as much transportation systems as possible, or as blowing up railroad tracks, whether it's blowing up different types of armored vehicles as they're traveling to protect that Atlantic Wall against the Allied invasion. Right? Destroying supply lines, destroying any types of industries or factories that were producing products for the German effort. That was their goal. That was their plan. And like I mentioned, I mean, it wasn't all, it didn't always have to be chaotic and brutal and destruction and explosives or anything. It can be by literature, by written pamphlets, posters to try to recruit more people to act out against the German army, to form a resistance groups. Okay. So, like I mentioned, they are also to help for the success of the D-Day invasion. They did a lot to try to disrupt many of the supplies going to the bunkers and to that Atlantic Wall, that defensive system that Germany had established in northern France. So, yeah, they did a great, great job. The last thing I want to talk about is this plot to assassinate Hitler. Okay, so after the D-Day invasion in 1944, this really was a prolonged war. The German troops have been all throughout Europe fighting for 4-5 years at this moment. Okay, you think these soldiers are tired of it? Heck yeah, they just want to go home, right? They want to go home. They've been really just trying to take over as much land as possible. And let's face it, even if the German army would have took over this large portion of land, the Soviet Union, and maybe took over Great Britain, these rebellious groups, these resistance groups would cause chaos throughout the streets for years to come. And it really wouldn't be a peaceful, I guess you can say, controlling of this land whatsoever. So the German army, it was kind of coming to a close for them. And one of the main generals that came up with this plan, his name was General Stauffenberg. Okay, don't worry about it. I'm not going to write it on the board for you to remember his name, but if you do see it on the assessment, that's who it is. His name's General Stauffenberg. He was in North Africa, the Operation Torch, right? You guys remember that? Okay, he actually lost his hand and he lost his eye. So he had kind of like a hook, and he also had a missing eye, an eye patch. And he was important because he tried to establish and kickstart this Operation Valkyrie. Right? So like I mentioned, Operation Valkyrie was this plan, this operation that if anything would happen to Hitler or these Nazi high-ranking officials, then the reserve army would take control, push out the SS, push out the Nazi occupied military, right? And they would really just surrender to the Allied powers. So Stauffenberg, trying to kickstart this operation, tried an attempt to assassinate Hitler. And this happened in the Wolf's Lair. Pretty cool base, huh? That's a name, pretty cool name, the Wolf's Lair. That's out closer towards Poland, right? Eastern part of Germany. And at the Wolf's Lair, out in the middle of the woods, really, okay, Stauffenberg, he put 2 bombs inside a briefcase. But as he was trying to really prime the 2 bombs, he only could get one in because someone was coming. One of the German officials was coming, and he had to quick put his bag together. So he got 1 bomb armed. And they were meeting inside this conference room, and he wanted to try to place the briefcase with the bombs as close as he could to Hitler. Okay, so as he was doing that, he placed it right next to a leg of the table where Hitler was standing. But unfortunately, for some reason, one of the German officials grabbed the briefcase and said, "Oh, Stauffenberg, you're standing down here. We'll take it down closer towards the edge of the table." So Stauffenberg's like, "Oh, darn. Well, I like my briefcase over there. It is what it is." So he's like, it should be okay. Because at that moment, there was a lot of, in the bunker that they were at, there was no windows really where he thought there was going to be at. But for some reason, too, it just seemed like fate was against his will. They decided to move the meeting to a room where there's a lot of windows. So we all know if an explosion would occur, that would allow the explosion to escape out the windows. If it happened inside a bunker, right, in a closed area, the explosion would be a lot more significant and impactful. But they decided to move the meeting to a room with windows, which allowed the explosion to escape out the windows, and it was unfortunate. Also, the table that they used to plan the meeting was a heavy oak table. So we all know oak is a really strong, durable, hard wood. So the explosion was actually kind of absorbed mostly by the oak table. Okay, it kind of broke up that explosion and prevented it from really taking out Hitler. Okay, so as he laid the briefcase down by the table, he said, "Oh, I got a call. I got a call back from Berlin. They needed me for something. I don't know." He made up some excuse. So he walks out the room. The explosion occurs. He tries to escape. He gets away, actually. He's getting to the plane to go back to Berlin to initiate Operation Valkyrie. And many of the reserved army back in Berlin were like, yeah, it happened. Hitler got killed. This is unbelievable. Many of the high-ranking officials got killed as well. Operation Valkyrie is in effect. So there's a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion with the German army at this moment. So like, oh, is Hitler dead? Like, who's going to take control? Operation Valkyrie, I guess it's happening. So they started trying to grab these SS officials, these SA officials, and say, all right, you guys are done. You're going to jail, right? And all of a sudden, Hitler calls back to Berlin and says, I'm fine. I'm not dead. Okay, Operation Valkyrie is not occurring. And Stauffenberg and many of the people, they didn't even really trial him because they kind of knew he was a part of this plan, the way he tried to evacuate back to Berlin and initiate Operation Valkyrie. And they killed him and many of the other generals that planned this plot, this assassination attempt by shooting range. Okay, they kind of placed him out and just shot him dead. So Operation Valkyrie, it was a failure. But it proved to the Allied powers that what? Not everybody trusted Hitler anymore. Not everybody thought he was this great man that gave them success at the end of this depression. And they're kind of sick of this war, this prolonged war. There's no reason for it anymore. Okay. So Operation Valkyrie, pretty neat story. Okay, they made a movie on it, like I said. Tom Cruise is in it. He plays Stauffenberg. And it's pretty interesting anyway to show how many of these officials in the German army didn't agree with what Hitler's aims were, his plans were to continue this war and try to continue fighting, even though they knew it was probably coming to a close and it was ending on their end. All right, is there any questions on French resistance, Operation Valkyrie? Guys good? All right, well, that's all I have. You have a little bit of time for yourself.